Good morning. Members Garrett and Holmes, staff and guests, the lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you. Good morning. And we will open up our February 11th Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus. And Mark Weber will be briefing us on policy update.
Well, good morning, board members Garrett and Holmes. It's day 30 of the legislative session. We've basically done a month. The volume of new bill introductions has slowed as the first cutoff approaches. It's in 10 days, or policy cutoff is February 21st. But while they've slowed, they haven't quite stopped, as we saw a bill proposing a form of social consumption of cannabis drop yesterday, kind of like an outdoor special occasion license. And then today brought Representative Morgan's big cannabis industry bill that would allow for out-of-state ownership, allow to charge those true parties of interest an additional licensing fee to cover the more complicated investigations, and would exempt social equity licenses from B&O tax for a number of years. So we'll have to see what happens with them, with both of them so close to cutoff. Yesterday,
all of that was in one bill.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. 1940 is the bill number. I'm sure we'll be talking about it more next week. Yesterday in the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee held a work session on cannabis ownership agreements and an update on the social equity in cannabis program. Licensing Deputy Director Nicola Reed presented these topics extremely well, and I think it was a really great work session overall. We got questions around the ownership caps, the cities with bans and moratoria. So that's a theme this year, as you well know, Board Member Garrett. And then questions around what constitutes ownership. I think Nicola was able to point to legislation that very clearly opened the door for the kinds of management agreements or franchising, branding, IP deals that we see in the market now, and that many smaller retailers bristle at. After the work session, the committee heard our agency request bill on data sharing around the medical cannabis excise tax exemption. I think it went well, and Caitlin Ryan from the Cannabis Alliance also spoke in favor of it. Today, our liquor cleanup and mast bill, the second of our agency request bills, gets a hearing in the House Consumer Protection and Business Committee. It's part of like an alcohol day with many other alcohol bills being heard. They've got the producer and retailer whose rule petitions you heard recently. And they'll hear from a bill that would allow licensees to sublet part of their facilities to another licensee, and a bill that would allow caterers to sell alcohol at special events that are not organized by nonprofits. As I mentioned last time, we're starting to see bills move out of committee as well. So on today's exact calendar in the House is the City of Seattle's proposal on outdoor service and the Seattle Center campus. As expected, the proposed substitute now has a sunset clause in 2027, a cap on the number of events in the Seattle Center campus, and it removes private clubs from license types that enjoy expanded outdoor service. That was a recommendation that we made. An amendment to the substitute would allow all cities that have been designated as fan zones or host cities to apply for the Seattle Center-like privileges to be to the board. So this would allow, a site in each of those, I can't remember if it's like 12 or 13 different cities across the state, to have something like the Seattle Center campus that would allow for expanded service. Also on the calendar is the bill on cannabis lab accreditation and certification. The bill appears to want to do away with duplicative rules around accreditation following the transfer of accreditation to the Department of Ag last year. But we have an open rules project to do much of that. Getting certification and when the LCB can revoke it, if a lab is acting in a fraudulent manner or not putting things into traceability, would be nice, but this bill will, I think, need our attention throughout the session. It could really help. It could muddy the waters, or it could be kind of indifferent. The psychedelic therapy bills had contentious hearings last week, with, I think, many arguing for more of a decriminalization approach versus the very regulated medical system proposed in the bill. We've seen amendment language and ideas to kind of limit the scope of the proposal, limit the number of therapy centers, for example, but haven't seen anything official quite yet. Tomorrow, the committee may exec the social equity extension/pause bill. We'll definitely look for amendments there. Again, this would pause the opening of the 50/80 round, the second round of licensure, and direct the LCB to study the barriers some licensees faced and what we can learn from those who were successful and opened. we pointed out that the bill appears to pause the current round, the 2780 round, or the first round of social equity licensure as well. So we will hope to see that, if nothing else, has been addressed in amendments. The cannabis ESOP bill is also scheduled for exec and a vote in committee on Wednesday. And then finally, a couple bills heard yesterday in the Senate are scheduled to move on Friday. Those are this year's version of Senator Schessler's licensing bill that requires the LCB to act on a license within 45 days of receiving or approving all the documents for certain license types, mostly around liquor. If at 45 days, the license would have to be issued automatically. Second, there's a bill to do a comprehensive study of alcohol taxes in Washington, comparing them to other state systems, looking at different ways to tax alcohol versus the way we do now, based on how the alcohol is produced, beer, wine, or spirits. On the cannabis side, the direct sales bill that would allow producers to do some limited direct sales to consumers is also scheduled as well. But as always, all of this is subject to change. They've been they've amended those schedules a lot in the last couple of weeks. But with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
On the the city of Seattle bill.
Yeah.
So what they're requesting, is it for the Seattle City Center only, or?
No, so there's two components of it. So the first component would be open to any city. And so a city or a port district could make a request to the board for expanded outdoor service in a certain neighborhood or in the city. So allowing things like fence-free barriers or other forms of outdoor service areas that may or may not be connected to the main, let's say, restaurant or bar.
Okay.
So that would be, they would submit that plan to us and we would review it. And if approved, then they could tell the licensees in that neighborhood or city, you get to do expanded service. The second part was just for Seattle and just for the Seattle Center campus.
Okay.
And so that was saying, you could have multiple licensees serving, and people could essentially take those drinks, open drinks, throughout that campus or much of the campus.
So it was
that's
two parts to it. Okay.
Yes, and so that's the part.
Okay.
It's that second part that other cities are saying, well, we might designate a place that's like a fan zone or whatnot, and we want to do that same thing there in any of those, dozen or so cities that are having big events for the World Cup.
Okay, so on the other one, on us changing subjects and now the social equity, were they aware, or was their intent to do the pause for everything, or when you brought it to their attention, they didn't know?
This question just came up. We were just meeting with our policy advisor. I have not heard back, frankly, and so that's something that we will try to talk to the prime sponsor today, before or after that hearing. I don't believe that it was their intent. So
Okay.
much of the bill was talking about the second window or
Right.
second application process. But the way we read the bill, it absolutely would pause the first round, those who are still
Right.
looking for a location.
Okay. That's all I had. Pete, did you have any questions or comments?
Just a couple of quick questions. Remind me, Mark, when the cutoff is for new bills?
February 21st is the policy cutoff. So if it hasn't passed out of committee, then it's mostly dead.
Got it. So the ones that are getting close to passing out of committee, does that include the 1515, the one we were just
Yes.
talking with?
Yes.
Okay.
So I
great.
think that's on the schedule today.
Any predictions about which one is kind of heading to the finish line?
Which one of?
Yeah, but the two parts. I mean, are both parts going to go for any city versus, the one for Seattle Center?
I guess I don't. Yeah, not a betting man. I don't know how that's going to go. I think the city of Seattle, in testimony, really wanted to keep that second component just for the city of Seattle.
Okay. I just wonder if they're making it to the finish line. They're still both viable.
They're both viable.
Okay. That's all I had, Ollie.
Okay. That's all I had, Mark.
Thank you.
All right.
Very
Thank you.
helpful.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you. And if nothing else, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.